A whole month ago, I put out a poll on my community tab to see what you guys were interested in, and the Wasteland car won. I have this nice red car here, but it's in pretty good condition, and I don't really want to mess it up. I do happen to have this chassis that originally belonged to a Mazda. No idea where the body of the Mazda went, but this will work as a start. My plan for this build is to take the chassis and make a body to go on top of it, using the red car as inspiration. The body itself will be made out of metal from an aluminum can. Once the body is made, some other embellishments will be added, along with a diorama base. Here's the metal I'll be working with. This was cut from a single can, and should actually be plenty for how big the car will be. Oh, and leave a comment for what I can do with these ends of the can. To get the body panels of the car, I used a piece of paper and cut it to the shape of the panels on the red car. This was then traced and duplicated onto another piece of paper and cut out, leaving a section connecting the two halves. I then bent it into its proper shape and test fit it. It was a little big, but that can be fixed later. Using this template, I made the first metal pieces. As suspected, they were a little too big, so I trimmed and bent them into the size and shape I needed. I also removed the front axle and wheels. This will be reattached in a different way a little later. After some more test fitting, I superglued the two panels together, and using some bits of cardboard as a spacer, I attached the panels to the chassis. For extra stability, I used a thin dowel rod to keep things in place. The doors were cut and bent to shape, and were attached with 2 layers of cardboard as well. To make attaching the hood easier, a sheet of cardstock was added to the inside. Before the hood though, I added the 2 rear panels, one of which I cut wrong, so now the side of the car says nutrition facts, upside down. Just like pretty much everything else, the hood got a couple of pieces of cardboard under it as a spacer. And yes, I'm fully aware that everything is a little bent and off-center and crooked. It gives it character. A dowel rod was added in the back, as well as the trunk. This was one of the few parts of the body that didn't need a cardboard reinforcement. Speaking of which, at the front of the car, 3 cardboard strips and a slightly modified grill piece from a much larger car model made up the radiator assembly. Inside these 2 gaping holes where the headlights should be, I added 2 plastic straws to look like the empty sockets. I also threw some really cheap seats into the driving compartment. These were cardboard. The support structure that holds up the roof was either dowel rods or toothpicks cut down. I made sure to put the rear ones at an angle. Using a piece of chrome sprue from another car kit, I made a rear bumper. It's not quite accurate to the real vehicle, but it's close enough. The windshields were made of food container plastic, and were cut and bent to shape. Once those were installed, I attached the roof, which pretty much completed the car's basic construction. Now it's time for the small details. The hood got some big spikes made out of toothpick ends. I also added a mirror on the side and a handle on each door. 2 boards made out of balsa wood were attached to the roof using hot glue. However, I made them look like they've been tied down using leftover string from my last video. I also strapped some 1/48 scale bags, which aren't quite the right scale, but they'll do, a straw, and a 1/35 scale fuel drum. What purpose do these things serve up here on the roof? I don't honestly know.
I cast base coat.
I did make sure to mask off everything that's supposed to stay chrome or clear, so here's me removing all the tape. Fun fact, rust is super easy to paint. Here I'm using the same technique for rust painting as I did in my robot video. First, stipple on a layer of brown, then a layer of red, keep in mind this doesn't have to cover the previous layer entirely, let some show through. And finally some orange. This is the thinnest and patchiest layer of them all. Once the rust was satisfactory, I added some light blue paint in a few places. This layer should be thick, but try to avoid the edges of the panels. I also barely added any to the roof, as this is typically where most rust is. For some added visual interest, I painted the passenger side door a different color and gave it a nice white stripe. We can assume the owner of this car scavenged it off another vehicle at some point. Speaking of which, let's give them somewhere to scavenge. These plastic bits from what might have been a fly swatter at some point will make a decent fence. The rest of the base was detailed with some chunks of balsa wood and more pieces of cardboard. The cardboard will be painted to look like pieces of pavement, as if there used to be a road that went through here. Once everything was glued down, I coated the foam in spackle. This will give everything more texture and protect it from the
Base coat.
Once it was spray painted black, I gave it a layer of brown. Over top of the brown, I added some dark tan with a sponge brush. This time I remembered to mask off the edges of the diorama, which made painting the sides quicker. The chunks of cardboard were painted to look like concrete, as mentioned, with most of the paint directed to higher areas and edges. After that, I did another dry brush of a lighter tan, and I'm not sure if I like it. Probably should have left it how it was. But let me know what you think. In this gap in the foam on the side, I added a couple of straws to simulate some buried pipes. The chunks of wood laying around were painted the same as the ones on the roof of the car. First with a layer of light tan, the same color as the highlights in the terrain, and then with a thin brown layer. The fences were done with the same rust process as the car, first brown, then red, and finally orange. The final detail was adding some bits of wire into a few of the wood bits to make it look like nails. Last thing to do was remove the tape from the sides of the base. And here it is. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you found this video interesting and want to see more like it, consider subscribing. We recently hit over 1,000 subscribers somehow, which is really cool. So thank you, and thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day.